One of the most ridiculed creatures is the psionic platypus, the thought eater. While they may seem harmless, you'd be very wrong and very dead. The ridiculous pictures aside, the creature will literally eat your brain, and the last time we checked, you need one of those to live. So let's dive into this creature that no longer exists, but we hope makes a glorious return. The Thought Eater is found in the Monster Manual from 1997 in first edition, and we should get the obvious out of the way. The creature's picture is terrible as it is disturbing. No one should be subjected to seeing an emaciated floating platypus with an oversized head floating through the ether. To make matters worse, the Thought Eater has webbed hands and feet it uses to paddle around the ethereal plane, the same way a real platypus might swim through rivers and lakes. Let's be happy the picture is in black and white, since the creature is described as sickly gray. The entire image would be hilarious if it wasn't so freaky. A Thought Eater is an unintelligent creature that drains its victims of psionic energy, which is probably where it gets its name from. Unlike many of the creatures we've discussed, the Thought Eater isn't malicious in its attacks. The poor thing is just hungry, feeding on the closest psionic or similar energy it can find, which may happen to be your brain. So don't take it personally, which will be much easier when the skinny platypus drains your intelligence into the single digits and you forget what it was like to have a brain. You'd think such a interesting looking creature would be easy to spot when it slides up next to you, but here's the catch. The Thought Eater resides solely in the ethereal plane, making it nearly impossible to see. Even if your vision does extend into that plane, you won't be able to attack it until you are in the ethereal plane too. It's probably good to figure out a way to do this quickly, as it will become harder and harder to do as your intelligence drops. The best way to defend yourself against these creatures is to attack them with your psionic powers. If you don't have big brain powers, a mind blank spell will make you undesirable to the creature, who will move on to its next victim, which is probably one of your allies. The Thought Eater exists by feeding on the mental energy of those around it. It begins to eat when it gets within 60 feet of the target in either the ethereal or physical planes. The sickly platypus will then absorb any psionic or spell energy the target attempts to use during this time. While psionic characters are relatively rare in this edition, spellcasters were not, becoming a favorite target of these creatures. Every spell level equaled 5 points of psionic energy, and the Thought Eater would continue draining you until it had consumed anywhere from 101 to 200 points of psionic energy. Don't think you're safe if you're playing a simple fighter. When the Thought Eater gets within 10 feet of any creature, it will feed on your thoughts, regardless if you have spells or psionic abilities. When this happens, the Thought Eater is devouring your intelligence, with 1 point equaling 10 psionic energy points. These points are lost forever. The information provided does not specify how many points of intelligence you lose every round, so we suppose if you have a benevolent game master, it'll only be 1 point. Whereas if your game master has a chip on their shoulder and likes to think they are God, you'll probably lose about 1d20 every round. In 2nd edition, the Thought Eater first appears in the Complete Psionics Handbook from 1991 and is later reprinted in the Monstrous Manual from 1993. We're not sure how they made the Thought Eater uglier, but TSR somehow managed to do it, as the Thought Eater looks like a fossil one might see in a dinosaur exhibit. It still has a head more prominent than it should on the body of its size, and its hands remained webbed but not its feet. At least in the Psionics Handbook, the creature looks ferocious, emerging from the clouds in the ethereal plane, intent on eating your thoughts. On the flip side, the Monstrous Manual art makes it look like the Thought Eater is posing for a portrait. We're not sure what they had against this creature, but they took out their dislike for it in the art. Unlike before, this incarnation has one primary goal: to avoid death. It seems this would be the main objective for most living creatures, but we guess the authors needed to make it crystal clear. Since the Thought Eater dies instantly on the material plane, you'll probably never see one there for its sake. Or if you do, you'll just assume it's the body of a platypus that died from starvation. Instead, you'll need to travel to the ethereal plane, but even then, we strongly advise you to avoid getting too close, or if you can't help yourself, push your big brain wizard in front of you. What makes them unique is they don't have to go beyond the ethereal plane to eat your mind energy, which doesn't seem fair since you can't see them, even if they're right next to you. To stay alive, the Thought Eater needs to eat brains, specifically brainwaves. It's ironic, as the creature itself is unintelligent, and its intelligence can't even be rated. You'd think they might gain a little knowledge from draining a brain, but we guess eating your thoughts doesn't allow that. The Thought Eater still has no physical attack, but it doesn't need them. You'll most likely be on the material plane, and the Thought Eater will follow next to you on the ethereal plane, softly caressing your brain energy. How the Thought Eater converts psionic and magical energy remains the same, but now the brain sucker can also drain the magical energy from prepared spells, not just when the spell is cast. Those poor spellcasters. They can't fall back on the party's fighters to save their fragile existence from these creatures. We now have information on how quickly they can feed on you, which is 10 psionic points per round. This means if you have psionic abilities, it will drain 10 points per round. If you have spells, the conversion is at 5 points per each spell level, which equates to a second level spell every round. And if you have just book smarts, it'll be 1 point per round. While you may think they are a bottomless pit of hunger for psionic energy, they will eventually let you go once they have reached their fill, although that full feeling is 1d100 plus 100 points. So the Thought Eater might have a small stomach, draining you of 101 points, or a massive bottomless pit with 200 points. Since they don't attack, you might wonder what they do with this vast quantity of points. They use these points as food and burn through 3 points per hour, so now don't you feel bad for not letting the platypus eat all your intelligence? You're starving it. If you refuse to feed the Thought Eater and its psionic points reduce to 0, it dies, and its body drops into the material plane. We can only imagine that barbarians are constantly seeing these dead platypuses everywhere as they set up camp, confused about where they came from. The Thought Eater does show up in a Guide to the Ethereal Plane from 1988 with just a bit more information about them. They occupy the border ethereal, not venturing into the deep ethereal where they can't feed on the intelligence of creatures on the neighboring plane. Most creatures on the ethereal plane have no problem dealing with these creatures, since Thought Eaters have no meaningful attacks and can be easily killed by anyone with half a brain. In addition, the ethereal plane literally gives them an ethereal body that keeps them alive. The moment they travel to any other plane, they will die. So it's not just the material plane that's toxic, but every other plane as well. Finally, this little platypus now looks terrifying in the Expanded Psionics Handbook from 2004 in the 3rd edition. The Thought Eater stands on all fours, is silvery gray, and has a large curved beak that takes up much of its face. It is now described as having a feline skull with the beak of a bird and claws like a cruel bird of prey. There are spines that run down its back, and it looks like a skeletal being with ethereal proto-matter dripping off of it. No longer trapped on the ethereal plane, a Thought Eater will stalk its prey on the ethereal plane before shifting to the material plane in hopes of surprising its foe. It can only remain on the material plane for 10 rounds, but that's 10 rounds longer than before. It attacks the target, but if it gets in dire straits, it has no problem just shifting back to the ethereal plane where it can lick its wounds and find someone a bit easier whose intelligence they can feast upon. The Thought Eater's primary attack is still eating your mental energy, now through an ability called Absorb. It's a melee touch attack and, when successful, drains 6 power points from the target if they happen to have psionic abilities. Non-psionic creatures, or a psionic creature drained of all its power points, will suffer 1 point of intelligence damage, providing the Thought Eater with food equal to 6 power points. It must eat 12 power points a day, but will treat weaker creatures like a buffet, eating them until they have to loosen their belts. A Thought Eater also has actual psionic abilities in this edition. Detect Psionics is the equivalent of the natural trait the Thought Eater had in previous editions. Distract does precisely what you think it does, forcing their foe to focus their attention on something other than the Thought Eater. Precognition lets them get the jump on you by seeing into the future, while Psionic Daze confounds its victim, who then will have no action while under its effects. Finally, the Thought Shield protects the creature from counter-psionic attacks, which is probably handy when you try to fight back while it eats your brain power. If you think that a Thought Eater is about as bad as it gets, we are also introduced to the Thought Slayer, the much bigger cousin of the Thought Eater. This creature is much larger than the Thought Eater, with streams of ethereal mist coming off its skeletal body and what appears to be internal organs somehow hanging from its frame. The Slayer survives by eating brain energy like its little brother, and has a few additional psionic abilities in its arsenal. What makes them extremely dangerous is their gaze trait. One look at the creature, and you're dead. Do not pass go, do not collect $200. You're just dead. Your entire brain is sucked dry at that moment, and we hope you don't feel anything as your brain shrivels into a prune. The DC to resist this effect is 19. If you only look at the Thought Slayer indirectly, you'll only be dazed for 14 rounds if you fail that save. Those rounds will feel like an eternity, but it's way better than being dead. In addition, if merely looking at you isn't enough to suck away your mind, it also has powerful psionic abilities that allow it to find psionic-powered individuals, break apart their minds, and much more. Also, now it can use its mouth to bite you for a painful hit, so you are no longer safe even if you happen to be a bit brain dead. If you do see this creature, well, it's probably too late, but we do recommend running and hoping someone a bit dumber is behind you. This is where the Thought Eater ends, existing no more after the 3rd edition. If we ever see them again is anyone's guess, but we advise keeping someone with powerful psionic abilities just in case they return to the ethereal plane and you weren't made aware of it.